And welcome senior pastor who invented this broadcast studio, Pastor Bruce Wall. Good morning.
Good morning, Sister Louise. I was trying to figure out who that very famous person was that you were talking about. The very not famous, but very famous.
Oh no, it's you. It's you because you are the very famous person in this building. Amazing.
Okay, I'll take that.
And on Sunday you were talking about a number of things that people young people in particular are misunderstanding with what is being allowed to be told about a number of things like smoking cigarettes, like smoking cannabis, like drinking alcohol. All of that was amazing.
All of those things I find can be like a trap that attract our young people because they say, well, society says it's okay. You can go ahead and do this and you can go ahead and do that. And then they find that their bodies cannot handle it. They find themselves with an addiction. They say, well, if society said I can do this, why am I not able to stay focused in school? So we need to teach young people how to search the Word of God so that the Word of God becomes a guide for them. So, because sometimes they just won't listen to what we're saying as parents.
I know that's what you were saying, and I appreciated that because I still work with people who are in prison, and there's a large number of young men, in particular, a few women, who have been sent to prison because they had cannabis on them, an amount of cannabis. Now, because the law has changed and it's legal to have cannabis on you, a certain amount, there are friends of theirs that can carry what they use and use it and not be in trouble, but they have been in prison, some for 10, 20, 30 years. And I find that unconscionable.
It's a shame. But so you have that factor. But I remember hearing about, and when I was working in the court system, sometimes I would go from my office to where the young people were locked up. And I would observe some of them and talk with some of them. And I remember just hearing young people saying, I don't even remember what I did to get in trouble because I was drinking. So one young person can drink a certain amount of alcohol. Another could drink another amount of alcohol. And for the first person, they seem to be okay. They can handle it. For the second person, they become aggressive. They want to fight everybody they see. Or they get behind the wheel of a car. Or they're smoking cannabis, marijuana, Mary Jane, as you used to call it.
Yeah, Mary Jane was the big thing, yeah.
But I've heard of stories of people smoking that stuff or other illegal drugs, and they're sort of pumping themselves before they need the courage to go do something they shouldn't do. And young people, the church used to be the moral fiber and the moral message. They had a moral message that young people used to listen to. But without the church in its rightful place, teaching a message of hope and compliance and purity and respect for yourselves and others, if that message is not communicated, then everybody makes their own decision as to how they're going to live their lives, what things they're going to engage in, and the church is becoming quieter and quieter and quieter.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm concerned about the mental health of our young people if they engage in things that trap them,
Mm-hmm.
which could end result in their being in prison or having a record and not being able to attain a good job. There's just so many different factors.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to scratch at it on Sunday without being charged with hate speech or saying that I'm so conservative that people don't want to hear what I have to say, or I'm an old fogey. I remember that term. You're just so old right now. You don't understand what young people need during these days. So it's a difficult time to navigate.
It is difficult, and and I'm mentioning it about the people in prison who I communicate with. Who they write to me, and the letters that they write to me are addressed to Global Ministries at 670 Washington Street, and some of them have been in prison for 20 and 30 years for MJ, and they know of their friends or their brothers or relatives who are using what's now called cannabis, that's legal, and if they carry it in a certain way, in a certain amount, they're not arrested for having it. And so the people who are in prison are saying, so why am I still locked up? Why am I still here?
Well, not only is it that group, but it's the other group that are in prison because the chemical lab had people that were falsifying, if that's the proper word. They said that the marijuana was a certain latency or quantity, or that it was marijuana and it was not, and they were not doing their jobs thoroughly, which end resulted in a lot of people going to prison on bogus charges now, and so they're still in prison.
I know. I also heard, because I don't use the stuff, but I also heard that what is being used now and called cannabis has another element in it.
Do you know what that is?
No, I don't. I don't know, because people are sharing their concern about what's going on, but they're not telling me too much detail, because I would like to be able to report it to the legislature and have them change the law.
There needs to be advocacy. There needs to be people who feel, for example, there are attorneys who focus on certain cases that other people will not look at because they're not making money on the case. People can't pay them. But there are some attorneys who have a campaign to assist people who are wrongfully convicted. And so you need that type of a person to go after this, to help those who are incarcerated. I mean, D.A. Rollins, I believe, was the type of DA that wanted to right some of these wrongs with people being in prison for example, they're going after these police officers who falsified documents and arrested, and prosecuted people that they set up. So, I mean, a lot of this is going on.
But those people that they processed against are predominantly people of color.
Right. That's right. And so, I think about the police and historically what their role was in Massachusetts, and they were slave catchers. And so I feel that we actually have that spirit still alive, with those officers who say, I need, because I was talking to an elected official who talked to me about how when they were working in a certain place, officers would say, I need to get some overtime. And that happened in my court. They would go out and make an arrest and then come back to the court and get overtime to help them pay their bills and to meet their finances. And that's wrong to have an officer who says, I'm going to go out and start making arrests because I've got to pay bills.
Exactly.
So a lot of our young people find themselves, and young adults find themselves incarcerated when they left their homes that morning or that evening and they went out to do whatever they were going to do. They never anticipated that the end result was going to be arrested and locked up. So the people that are sending you letters to the church, again, how do they find you? That's interesting to me.
They find me because Massachusetts CURE, Citizens United for the Rehabilitation of Errants, is established here by me. So they write to CURE.
So, but if they're incarcerated, how do they get the CURE? They don't know about CURE. They don't have an address for CURE. How do they find all
They
of
do
that?
get it because I produce a newsletter and I send it to individuals who have been writing to me, including people who write to me from Colorado, California, Arkansas.
So you respond
Alabama.
nationwide.
Yes, I do, because what happens when people write to me from out of state, they write and they say, I know that you are not going to be able to help me where I am right now, but I was born in Roxbury, and I intend to come back to Boston when I am released from this horrible place that I'm in now. And when I come back, I want to know what's going on in Boston. I want to know how I can be helped.
That's a lot of responsibility if all of those people ever came back to Boston and started looking you up. Similar to what happened to Pastor Hobbs when we were on another radio station and people were able to hear us in some of the prisons outside of Boston. They came here as searching for him because he was playing music that they enjoyed, or he prayed for inmates, and they wanted to come here. And I felt that we had an overload of people coming, that we didn't have enough people in the church who were trained to be able to interact with people. And it was I was feeling bad because we could not meet the expected needs that they had.
But you now have me, you have Pastor Hobbs, you have Eric, that are able to work with those people. So you can't turn them away.
Well, it would be interesting if we had a full-time or part-time person who was at the church who could receive people, do an assessment, and then figure out what resource in the community, because it's my understanding that Pastor Hobbs and Eric have established a connection with the returned citizens, City of Boston returned citizens.
But they're also on the board of CURE, both of them. Yeah.
So are you folk able to meet, or because of the pandemic you're not able to meet?
We've only had one major meeting, actually. We've talked to each other a number of times, but and I've talked with Pastor Hobbs a number of times too, because I did go into the Thompson facilities with him. So we've done some things in connection with each other's volunteer work to try and help people that we knew about. The people who are in the local facilities are oftentimes not going to be serving a lot of time. Some of them are just there waiting to be allowed to go to court and have their case heard.
And not all of them are from Massachusetts.
A few of them are not from Massachusetts.
So if they're set free after their cases, they're out of here. They're going back to their cities and towns.
Yeah, they should go back to where they're originally from, because that's what I said originally, with people writing to me from Colorado or California saying, hey, I was born and raised in Roxbury, and I'm coming back once I finish my time here.
Have you had any actually come to the door and ring the bell when you were here?
No, they haven't. They haven't done that, but they have written a letter and said they were on their way, and I have actually talked to them. I talked to a few people across the street on the sidewalk.
What does that mean? I don't understand.
Well, I was on the sidewalk one day at a meeting that you were conducting, and some guy came up to me and he said, "Hey, I remember you. You used to visit me." And I said, "Where?" And he said, "You know where." And I said, "Now I know where."
Yeah,
And then he said, I am moving back to New Hampshire.
Oh.
But I want to thank you for visiting me when I was in Concord.
Was that a black person?
Yes.
Yeah. I find that interesting. But I understand why. A black person who was from the hood, from Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, South End, and decides that they're going to be moving to New Hampshire because for some of them they want to get as far away
You're right.
from the elements here in the city. Although I do know a person that used to come to this church who went to New Hampshire, bought a house in New Hampshire to get away, but I was told recently is doing time because although they were in New Hampshire, they never cut ties with what was happening here in Boston. And they lived in New Hampshire, but they kept coming back to Boston to do what they did that eventually got them in trouble.
Yeah.
So that's a struggle. And going back to Sunday, the church, if the church had the financial resources to be able to have somebody here that would do the visitation and interact with people and either have an ongoing direct connect with the Office of Returning Citizens, so that, because my assumption, if that office is viable, it has the resources. It knows where the resources are, that all we would have to do is identify people, do the intake, and then talk to the people at City Hall to say, these are the needs. But I don't know how viable that office really is.
Well, yeah, because City Hall isn't going to be able to offer anything for people that are coming out of state prisons. The other thing I want to remind you of was the first time I ever met Reverend Haynes. Before I met you, when I met Reverend Haynes, it was in Dedham, Massachusetts. He had come out because he was still on the border parole. Yeah, he was on the border parole. And he came out to try and get some money from me. I had some grant money that I was passing out from the state. And he came out to explain why he wanted it, told me who he was and what he was doing and where he was from. He talked about Roxbury. And I said, well, I know Roxbury very well. I said I was born in Boston. So that was interesting. And then a few times I used to come back and go to his church.
Interesting.
And go on the second floor. I would sit on the second floor.
Okay, I'm trying to figure this out. The first floor is the main entryway where they had the big TV.
Right.
So you were at the second floor. You would come to the main sanctuary, not the balcony.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was many, 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 many years ago.
Many years ago. Yes. Yes.
And was the church full when you?
It
do you
was full.
remember?
It was absolutely full. And a few people would say to me, "Are you in the right church?" And I said, "Yes, I'm in the right church."
Yeah, 12th had a very diverse congregation. So it wasn't, and very diverse congregation of people who were members of the church, not just the visitors.
I wasn't a member. I was just visiting periodically.
But you were still going to the Roman Catholic Church at that time?
No, I was not.
You had stopped.
I had stopped because there was nothing about God's Word or the Bible in the Roman Catholic Church that I attended.
So what was it? What had you going until you stopped?
I got divorced.
So explain that. When you got divorced, it made it difficult for you to continue to go to a mass?
Yes, because I was told that I could not receive communion and that I could not participate in certain things in the church as a divorcee. So I said, well, I better try and find another place I can go.
So that was said to you by the priest,
The priest.
personally,
The
or
priest.
in the liturgy?
The priest, yes. The priest told me.
So personally.
Yeah. And he said, you know, he said you can come and you can do this, but you can't do that. So I thought, well, I want to learn something about something I've lost. And so I decided to go to I moved into Dorchester, and I went to 7 different Baptist churches in Dorchester. And the one that then I became the president of the neighborhood council. And while I was the president of the neighborhood council, I met you.
And was that because I was attending the meetings at the time?
Yes. It was because you were attending the meeting. Yeah. And you wanted to know what we were doing at the meetings. And that was very interesting. And then your co-host,
Pastor Craig,
allowed me to have my public meetings in the church.
Right. So how many years did they stay in the church? Because I know eventually they moved out.
They was me. There was a number of times. It was a lot of times. A long time.
Like 5 years, 6 years?
No, it wasn't that long, but it was maybe 3 years.
And so did it leave under your watch, or did it leave under the watch of a new president or coordinator?
It left under the new coordinator who wanted to meet in the public building.
The Great Hall.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I had a meeting here at the church to talk about the parking lot across the street because the city wanted to take it back. And so I had the meeting here, not the
Right.
Great Hall. And quite a few people came out. And one of the people, who happened to be white, said to me on the way out, this was a good meeting. And I'm sure when he came in, he had all these thoughts about coming into the church. So that was an issue. What was going to happen in the meeting. But even though it was a meeting to discuss what was happening, I still had an opportunity to minister to people and to make them, to help them to feel welcomed in our context. And I tried not to act like a bully as it related to the city. I just tried to explain what was happening, the need for the parking lot, and just about everybody that was there was supportive of what we wanted and needed.
I think we gave you. I think my organization gave you a certificate.
A certificate of.
thanking you for your help to us.
Are you talking about your organization,
Yeah.
or are you talking about the neighborhood organization?
The neighborhood organization. Yeah.
I'm sure that if I looked hard enough, I'd find it
Oh
somewhere.
yeah. Oh yeah. That was it was yes. I got it printed. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It was very nice. Yes. We thought you were pretty special.
But you had not joined the church at that time. You were still.
No, I hadn't joined the church.
And you were
but-
still going to different churches?
And I was still trying to figure out where I should go. And I then started working for Craig in his office, which was on the first floor.
Mm-hmm.
And someone came to visit me, Turhan came to visit me on a regular basis because he loved talking to me.
Turhan would come to the church and just sit there and talk with you?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there was a lot of interest, a lot of interaction with people who came to this church, who were members of this church, who were interesting to me. And I ended up coming to the church. And what happened was when my sister was killed on Park Street by an automobile, someone in an automobile, excuse me, who had been drinking and using drugs, and he killed my sister.
That's a bad combination.
Yeah, and he killed my sister. After that, I was more determined to find a church, and I was going to a number of churches, and this was the church that when I came here, some of your members put their hands on my shoulders and prayed with me. They're still praying with me. So I think that there's something special about Global Ministries. I mean, at the time it was Dorchester Temple, but the people in the church at Dorchester Temple and now at Global Ministries are special and have some interest in passing God's word on.
I think with some people who used to attend here come back or come in for an event, you always look for the people that you thought, the people that used to be there. And and you're one of the people that has been here for a long period of time.
29 years.
Yeah, which probably could be longer than the people who were originally here when you first came. I don't think they spent 29 years here at the church.
Maybe not. I mean, I know a few. I wouldn't use their names now, but I know a few that the ones that actually prayed with me when they heard that my sister was killed, which was interesting because all the other churches that I went to, nobody prayed with me. Even the Catholic Church, nobody prayed with me.
You know, the other day I had to deliver a package in Dorchester, and I don't know. There is a church that's been demolished right on Talbot Avenue. And if you were to drive down Talbot Ave and then take a left to come up Wells Avenue, where our church is, just before you take the turn to the right, there's just a big empty lot now, and it used to be, I think it was Ashmont Church.
Oh.
And so when I went to do something for Karen, and I pulled out, I said, "Wow, look at that area. A church used to be there." So that's one church that's been sold, and that's gone. There's another pastor in Carbon Square who moved his church to Roxbury, which I don't understand that move. Then there's another pastor who sold his building and he left. So that's 1, 2, 3. I think there are actually 4 churches that have closed their doors and are leaving the area. One church, I believe, died, and the other churches, I believe, went to either follow where their people were going. And so as I was driving, I said to myself, I would not want to see a big hole around here with the church gone.
Right.
But if you do not plan for the future, you'll step into the future and it will consume you. And I know as a church, and when we talk about mental health, sometimes, for example, if a person is sick, sometimes they don't want to talk about their funeral or how the home that they live in. They keep putting things off, and mental health wise for them to enter into making those decisions could depress them and depress their families. But you got to do it. As a church, mental health. As a church, we have to start sitting and talking about the future of the church.
Right.
Because if we do not, the future will consume us. It's going to happen whether we plan for it or not. But sometimes people don't want to do that because it could mean a major change in what you do, where you're located, and mental health. So a question for you is, how do people move to have a discussion about things that could be uncomfortable? What suggestions would you make to help people step into it? Because if you don't, you'll be consumed, and by the time you finally sit down and talk about final arrangements or the direction of the church, it's too late. Things have already happened.
Well, I would, because of the experience I've had earlier in this church and recently in this church, I would want to provide a prayer before I had a conversation with someone that I wanted to get some information from them or share something with them. And I think that would make a difference to someone, rather than just talking about, hey, what are you thinking about? Hey, what's up, guy? What's up with you? I think that kind of stuff, that kind of attitude stuff does not work. But if we were to do what, as I said, has been done with me, and that is to share God's word and to say something about what it is that somebody wants to talk about, and then share God's word again and say, let's come back with each other another time, and let them know that it's not over. There's more.
Remember years ago in this church when we decided we were going to have racial reconciliation meetings, and we used to have them upstairs on the second floor.
Right.
And at the time that I think that's a clear instance of us deciding to be proactive and start having the discussions rather than letting things just take place. And so we had the discussions, but I felt that we as a church were not ready for those discussions because, number one, they became very raw because people were really opening up. Two, I think that people were saying, I thought we were here and I thought we had this type of relationship, but based on these intense conversations we're having, which hurt, we're not as close as I thought we were. So the racial reconciliation meetings that we had here, I think, did more harm than good because we didn't know how to prepare for it. We didn't know that we needed to prepare before we had the meetings. And again, there were a number of people who came to the meetings who said to themselves, I didn't know this person was feeling that way and that person was feeling that way, and it made them feel very uneasy. And a number of people, in my opinion, were hurt because what they thought the church was, it really wasn't when we had the racial reconciliation meetings. Mental health in your neighborhood, how does a church or a business or a community prepare for discussions like that?
Well, it's interesting because I was a member of the church at the time, and I did attend some of those meetings, and I came away with some information that was important to me, because I saw an attitude from some black members and an attitude from some white members, which was negative. But I was able to pray about it and still participate in the church and not use it against anyone.
I think if attitudes before the series of meetings were cordial with each other, then we started having the meetings, and then attitudes changed. I think sometimes the attitudes change because people are hurt, and now rather than coming in and being proactive, they're now being defensive because someone either said something that they disagree with, and they either want to say something about that, or they don't want to say anything, and they bury it on the inside. Some people left the meetings and decided that they weren't coming back because it was too much. And then the other thing is this: when you have reconciliation meetings, if you're not reconciled before you have the meetings, there's nothing to reconcile to. Because when I remember you and I having a disagreement, and I think I said to you afterwards, let's go to, what's the place we used to go to eat lunch? Olive Garden.
Oh yeah. Right.
When you can have a discussion with somebody and you disagree, and then you can say, we're going to go out to eat, and you go out to eat and you're laughing and enjoying yourselves, it shows that you truly have a friendship and a relationship.
Exactly.
When you come into a situation and you have difficult discussions and they're painful, and you find yourself moving away from that person, it says to me that what you thought you had, you didn't have. And I think that's what happened at the church. What we all thought we had, we didn't have, because we couldn't get through those series of discussions. Do you remember all of that?
I do, but what I'm saying is everything that I've experienced in this church has been part of the learning for me, because I only started learning about God's Word when I was in my 60s. So, everything that I'm taking in, whether it's negative or positive, has been something I'm learning. So I don't turn around and say and develop an attitude against the conversation. And I know that going back to what you said when you and I were in disagreement about something, I don't even remember what it was.
I don't either.
but going to lunch was better, and that was similar to praying for me. If you and I had prayed with one another. But you and I had done a lot of things as friends, because I remember walking with you in the neighborhood for a while, and there was a lot of things going on that I was learning about Roxbury and about you and about Reverend Haynes and so many things. There was so much that I was learning just being your friend. And that's why I'm not able to say that even a reconciliation meeting has been negative. Everything's been positive.
And I think when you have a relationship and you have gone through some of these difficult discussions prior to going to the racial reconciliation meetings, you already have a tone, you already have a reflection, you already have a path back to disagreements.
Right.
And if I were to ever do anything like that again, I would do a series of meetings on how I would ask a question: are we reconciled? What's the evidence of being reconciled? And how you can return to a friendship or a relationship after very difficult either experiences or discussions, that there needed to be a prep. Another example, Grace Chapel.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you were part of this, but when we were going on missions trips,
Mm-hmm.
we would meet at Global Ministries, the Grace Chapel members and Global. We would meet here, and then we would also meet in Lexington to start having discussions, because we didn't want to take a missions trip, have something happen in relationships, and then find that we're in another country and we didn't know each other. So we started doing that here, and so that when we went to Tennessee, it was 3 times we went to Tennessee.
I went to Tennessee, I went to Lexington, and I can remember having conversations about this with Dan Janey.
Did Dan Janey go with us to Tennessee? Do you remember?
I don't
remember.
I don't think he went to Tennessee. But I do remember having conversations with him about all of the things that we talked about. But he did go to Lexington at the Grace Chapel.
So do you ever wake up in the morning and you say, Danny's not here?
I know it bothers me, because sometimes I say to myself, he's still here. I know.
Right. Isn't that something?
I know he's still here because he's still working for DMH. He's still doing this. He's still doing that. Because I knew him when I first came here, and I discovered that he was a member here.
You knew him before you came.
I knew him before I came. I was in shock to find out that someone I had known for many years in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of Mental Health. We had very different roles and responsibilities, but we would attend in meetings in Worcester or in other parts of the Commonwealth, and talk about what was going on, and in our training, in our history. And I started coming to this meeting, as I said, after my sister was killed. And I turned around one day, and he was standing next to me, and he said, "What are you doing in my church?"
That's the way he talked.
That's the way he talked, yeah. "What are you doing in my church?" And I said, "I didn't know this was your church." So I knew him many years before as a colleague. And then I started getting to know him as someone in my church. I'm in his church now. And there was a lot I got to know about him. We were friends for a long time.
That's amazing.
I still think that we're friends.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Because when we were friends at 12th Baptist Church, and when I left 12th and I went to the skating rink, he ended up coming with me. So we were ministering together there. And then when I left the skating rink, we went across the street to the police station, and we were having service there, and he was with me. And then we came to the church, and that was my final move, and he was with me. That's amazing. So all of that time. And he served on the board of Bruce Wall Ministries.
Right.
That's amazing. I sometimes look around and I say, why isn't Danny in the meeting? It's like it's always going to be there. Yeah. It's never going to go away.
Yeah, no, as far as I'm concerned, he's still around.
What is it, mental health in your neighborhood? This is probably why I'm talking this way. Mental health in your neighborhood. What does it do to you or to a person when a lot of the people that were around you are no longer here? Turhan Shepherd is gone. Dan Janey is gone. And I can just mention many, many more people that have gone ahead of you, who may have been younger than you. How does that impact you at all? Do you just say goodbye? Does it have you thinking about your own mortality?
No, no, no. I don't think of my own mortality, and I don't say goodbye because I anticipate seeing them again, both of them. I anticipate that when God calls me, whenever that might be, that I will see those two men who were my friends again. I'm not upset by it.
So for you, you're looking forward to a reunion.
Yes, it will be a reunion. Yes, because I expect to see my grandmother, my grandfather, because they raised me. I expect to see my father, who I finally met when I was 15 years old. And, there's a number of people in my life that are special, and I will still see them.
What does this say to you about me when I make this statement? I fully expected, if you would look at my funeral plans, my homegoing plans, you would see on the program that Reverend Hayes was supposed to do my service.
Right.
And so what does that say about me, that no matter how old he got, he was supposed to say, okay, God, I have to stay here a little longer because he's not gone yet.
Right.
What does that say about me?
Well, it tells me that you have a faith that isn't quite available to you.
So you said a faith that's not available to me,
Right.
which is Reverend Hayes' faith.
Yeah.
So you think he might come back and surprise us?
No.
And say, I'm really in Barbados. I really didn't.
No. I'm just thinking that you're going to see him when you pass. I'll see him ahead of you.
You never know.
Yeah.
For those of you who are watching, this is Louise Carcione, and I'm Bruce Wall, and this is Mental Health in Your Neighborhood. And it seems like both she and I need some mental health support today because we're walking down all these memory lanes, and I feel that I am listening to you and then responding, but then initiating some discussion myself. That this morning I'm unloading some of the things that have been on my mind, that I've been thinking about, because we just never know what's around the corner for us.
Right.
And it seems to me that you're living ready for the rest of your life. And I want to live ready for the rest of my life. And Sunday when I was talking about Karen and I getting our booster shots, and how I was pushing her around, and how people were looking at this darling older couple, I didn't think that I had arrived at that point. As I'm pushing her around, I'm saying she's going to be out of the wheelchair one day, and we're just a young couple. But that experience made me feel, Louise, we're an old couple.
Well, you're younger than I am, and you're also older than she is. So
she should have been put. That's exact. I'm glad you brought that up. I think what bothered me the most is that I anticipated that she would be taking care of me and wheeling me around to get my booster shot. You hear what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it's I'm the one running to get the wheelchair. I'm the one putting the wheelchair away.
I know, and you've been doing a great job. You've been doing a great job for your wife.
Yeah.
You have complained about it now and again, but you have done it. You have been physically available to her, and you have done it. and I'm sure that she's grateful.
And that she would do the same for me.
Yes, I believe it. I believe it.
Or hire somebody to do it.
And she would complain about it, but she would make sure it got done. She would make sure it got done.
Well, one of these days, two things. We ought to have a discussion. First, we need to have some seniors. But we ought to have a discussion, you and I. I'd like to bring Edna in.
Oh, yes.
One day.
Yes.
And Carol.
Yeah.
And have a discussion about being a senior and the impact on being a senior. Do we recognize it? Look, Edna comes to the church during the week and she cleans.
I know.
You know, and she does all these things. And I had to push Edna. I had to push Edna from sitting out in the cold by the door. I said, Edna, you've got to bring that inside.
I'm so glad that you did that. I'm so glad that you did that, because the hallway she was sitting in was very cold.
It was too cold.
It was cold and uncomfortable, yes.
And so I pushed her, and she said, no, Pastor, I want to be able to be right here so the people, I'll be able to see the people, and that I don't want to have the door opening and closing. And that same day that she said no, she came in. And I feel 100% better,
right?
Because it's warm now,
right.
You know, where she's at, and it's a better place for her.
I know it. She's doing a fine job too, and you know, I bring things in for her to use in the sanctuary, like the plants, the real plants, and I also brought in the new coverings for the tables that are for Christmas. I just bought them last week, and I just hand them to her, and she just picks them up and takes care of them and puts them where she knows I want them to be. And I don't even have to tell her, but she does it. And if we don't have an opportunity to have a conversation, she calls me at my home to make sure that I'm all right.
So the question now then would be, if we try to get her to come in, I'm sure her daughter brings her in anyway during the week.
Her daughter brings her in on a Friday.
Okay, so why don't, when you get an opportunity, ask her if she would be your guest here as we talk about the process of growing older and being a senior. Because I have to remind myself. Let me also say this. Then you need to take the last word because we have 5 minutes. So something had happened in the area where I lived, and a group of us had to go on a search. And I actually went down the bottom of my street, not down the driveway, but I went down the backyard, which goes all the way down, and we were all looking for something. And then I started climbing back up. I got halfway up. I didn't have the breath. I didn't have the breath to continue. It was wet. So on this little hilly mountainous area, the leaves were wet, so my feet were slipping. I wanted to yell out for help, to get someone to help me get up the hill, but there was nobody around, and other people were in another searching. And I said again to myself, "You're a senior. What the heck are you doing? What are you doing climbing?" Louise, I didn't have the breath. And then when I finally made it to the top, Karen was in her automobile, and she said, "Are you all right?" I couldn't even speak.
Oh my goodness!
Because I couldn't carry. Again, if we need to recognize who we are, the age that we're at, and we need to act appropriately.
Yes,
point the finger at me.
Well, it's true, because we all need to know something about ourselves, so that we don't try to do something that we can't do.
Well, Louise, it's you got less than a minute.
Less than a minute. Oh my. Well, I always appreciate these conversations that you and I have, and I hope that those people listening to us appreciate what we're talking about as well, because we're friends and we're talking about God, we're talking about this church, we're talking about what's going on between us, between people here. We're talking about an advantage that we would like to develop for people who are aging, to talk about that and share it with others. So we'll see if we can get our elder folks to come in next time.
Good.
So wonderful holiday to everybody. Enjoy.
People care, but not enough. Down south.